31 minutes. That was the exact lifespan of Representative Ilhan Omar's planned political execution before it violently imploded into a televised plea for mercy. She had marched into the congressional hearing room with a singular lethal objective, the utter destruction of Ben Shapiro. She didn't even wait for his name to be formally entered into the ledger before launching her assault. Leaning aggressively forward, her index finger aimed like the barrel of a loaded weapon, she filled the room with a sharp, combative frequency that actually vibrated the acoustic equipment. She branded him an Islamophobe, a hate profiteer, and a menace. This man is not a scholar, she sneered with dripping disdain, demanding he be thrown out. He is a propagandist. Across the expanse of the room, Ben Shapiro sat completely motionless, not frozen by fear, but anchored by calculated discipline. He brought no notes, no binders, and no folders. His only armor consisted of a dark suit, a single pen, and a mysterious photograph resting face down on the polished mahogany. Bearing the quiet, terrifying resilience of a man who had absorbed the internet's most creative hatred every single day for a decade, he didn't flinch. He simply waited for the wooden crack of the chairman's gavel. When the floor was finally his, the man globally infamous for a dizzying, machine gun velocity of speech did the absolute last thing anyone expected. He slowed down. "I wouldn't want to get in the way of a performance," he stated, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly steady calm. In an instant, he stripped away the cheap political theater and suffocated the room with a horrifying reality. He wasn't there to trade partisan jabs. He was sitting there as the Anti-Defamation League's absolute #1 target for online anti-Semitism. The bureaucratic static evaporated as he methodically laid out the sheer, suffocating volume of hate. 37,000 anti-Semitic tweets in a single year, his face plastered with swastikas, and a chilling email discovered by his pregnant wife. It contained an image of his innocent 3-year-old daughter, digitally superimposed into a Nazi gas chamber, accompanied by a sickening message: "This is where your family belongs." Gently touching his yarmulke, he made his stance undeniably clear. "I wear this every day as a statement," he declared, unapologetic and unyielding. "I am Jewish." Visibly, publicly, unapologetically. He painted a grim, chilling portrait of modern America, a reality so fractured that his elementary-aged children required heavily armed guards just to safely learn the alphabet. And the true devastation of the hearing hadn't even begun. After another calculated pause, he outlined his professional history to underscore his ultimate point. "I was 17 when I became the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in America. I was 20 when I graduated from UCLA. I was 23 when I graduated from Harvard Law School. I have written 16 books. I have built a media company valued at over $200 million. Yet, he noted the dark undercurrent accompanying his massive success. And in all of that, in all of those years of public life, the single most common piece of feedback I have received is not, 'I disagree with your argument.' It's a swastika sent to my email, sent to my wife, sent about my children." His gaze swept across the panel of committee members, flickered to the array of television cameras, and finally locked on to Representative Omar. "I was invited here today to testify about anti-Semitism in American public life," he stated firmly. "I could cite the FBI data. Anti-Semitic hate crimes up 37% in the last 3 years. I could list the synagogues vandalized. I could name the Jewish students assaulted on college campuses. I could read you the text that Jewish parents in this country receive from their children. Someone drew a swastika on my locker. Someone said Hitler was right. I'm afraid to wear my Star of David to school." He dismissed these conventional avenues of testimony entirely. "But I'm not going to do that," he declared. "Instead, I want to talk about something specific. I want to talk about what happens when anti-Semitism doesn't come from anonymous trolls or white nationalists hiding behind screen names." His voice sharpened slightly. "I want to talk about what happens when it comes from the floor of the United States Congress, from a sitting member, from someone who swore an oath to represent all Americans, including the Jewish ones." Shapiro locked eyes with Omar, projecting not a heated anger, but the cold, clinical precision of a surgeon mapping out an incision line before making the very first cut. "I want to talk about the congresswoman from Minnesota," he announced. Omar shifted uncomfortably in her leather chair. Beside her, her chief of staff leaned in to offer a frantically whispered consultation, but she quickly waved him away with a sharp, dismissive gesture, projecting the arrogant body language of a politician who believed the man testifying was entirely beneath her engagement. "Bring it," She challenged loudly, ensuring the nearby microphone picked up her defiant taunt. She flashed a confident smile toward the public gallery, eliciting scattered laughter and a loud shout of "Go Ilhan" from an enthusiastic supporter. The chairman struck his gavel once to restore order. Shapiro offered no smile and no visible reaction to her taunt. Instead, he deliberately picked up his pen, the solitary object on his desk, aside from the hidden photograph, and commenced his verbal dissection. Congresswoman, in 2012, you posted a tweet. Let me read it exactly. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. He let the deeply loaded phrase hang heavily in the quiet room. Hypnotize the world, he repeated. Let's talk about that word hypnotized, because words have histories, and this word has a very specific one. He traced the dark medieval lineage of the trope, the idea that Jews possess some supernatural power to deceive and control non-Jews goes back to the medieval blood libel, the claim that Jews use the blood of Christian children in religious rituals. It is the foundation of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, the most famous anti-Semitic forgery in history, a fabricated text that claimed Jews were secretly manipulating world events through finance, media, and government. He drove the horrific historical context home. That text was used to justify pogroms in Russia. It was cited by the Nazi Party in Germany. It is still circulated today by white nationalist groups, and notably by Hamas, which references it in its founding charter. He paused again, allowing the sheer weight of the association to settle over the paralyzed room. Hamas, the charter, the same Hamas that had attacked Israel. He listed the age-old conspiracies. The Jews control the media. The Jews control the banks. Israel has hypnotized the world. Same accusation, same trope, different century, different mouth. Omar immediately leaned toward her microphone, defensive and primed. I have apologized for that tweet and acknowledged. You apologized. Shapiro interrupted smoothly, nodding his head. In 2019, 7 years after you posted it, after you'd already been elected to Congress, after you'd already been seated on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He dismantled her defense with ruthless mathematical logic. The apology came when the political cost of not apologizing exceeded the political cost of apologizing. That's not remorse, Congresswoman. That's math. But we'll come back to what your apologies are worth. Let's move to 2019. He pivoted smoothly. He still hadn't glanced at any notes. He didn't need to, as he had been intimately living with these exact quotes for 7 long years. February 2019. You were asked about political support for Israel. You tweeted, and I'm quoting, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." He unpacked the slang for the record. Benjamins. $100 bills, the Puff Daddy song. Jews and money. He highlighted the casual cruelty of the post. You added a musical note emoji, Congresswoman, an emoji to an anti-Semitic tweet like it was fun. Turning his attention back to the broader committee, Shapiro posed a devastating rhetorical trap. Let me ask everyone in this room a question. Name me one other ethnic group in America whose political influence a sitting Congresswoman has publicly attributed to money. He challenged the silent room. 1. Take your time. 5 seconds passed. Then 10, absolute silence. You can't, he answered for them, because if a Republican Congresswoman tweeted that black political influence was all about the Benjamins, she would be removed from Congress within the week. There would be a resolution of censure on the floor by noon. The NAACP would issue a statement before lunch. CNN would run a 3-day panel, and she would deserve every bit of it. He drew the stark, undeniable contrast. But when it's Jewish influence, when it's Jews and money, the oldest anti-Semitic stereotype in Western civilization, the stereotype that got my ancestors murdered in Europe for centuries, you get a scolding from your own party and you keep your seat. Omar's knuckles turned ghostly pale as she gripped her microphone with white-hot intensity. AIPAC spends millions buying politicians. She fired back blindly. That's a fact. I was criticizing a lobby, not Jewish people. The entire hearing room seemed to gasp and inhale as one collective entity. The seasoned reporters in the front row simultaneously stopped typing at the exact same instant, freezing like pedestrians who had just witnessed someone walk face first into a glass door. A faint flicker of genuine surprise widened Shapiro's eyes, slightly not from shock, but from the distinct expression of a man who has just been handed a monumental, unforced gift. He never expected to receive this early in the battle. Thank you, Congresswoman, Shapiro replied, his voice maintaining the calm, lethal precision of a surgical scalpel. Thank you for proving my point. He spelled out the absolute magnitude of her blunder for the permanent record. You just said on camera, for the record, in a congressional hearing specifically convened to discuss anti-Semitism, that a Jewish lobbying organization buys politicians, not influences, not advocates, not supports. You said buys, as in purchases, as in money. Jewish money buying politicians. Turning slowly to face the bank of television cameras, he delivered his devastating verdict. That is the anti-Semitic trope. She just repeated it again in a hearing about anti-Semitism. I genuinely could not have scripted this better if I'd tried. If I had written this as a scene in a movie, the studio would have rejected it as too on the nose. The color completely drained from Omar's face, transforming from flush red to a sickly white. She frantically looked toward her staff for a lifeline. Her chief of staff was staring miserably at the floorboards, while her communications director had lowered her phone entirely, her hand clamped over her mouth in sheer professional horror. Up in the public gallery, the woman who had proudly brandished the Go Ilhan sign quietly lowered it down into her lap in defeat. Moving on, Shapiro declared, refusing to grant her even a millisecond of mercy. A few weeks after the Benjamins tweet, after the apology, after the scolding, after Pelosi publicly condemned you, you appeared at a public event at a bookstore called Busboys and Poets and said, quote, I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. He carefully set his pen down on the desk. Dual loyalty, the oldest anti-Semitic accusation in the Western world. He elaborated on the devastating historical consequences of the lie. The claim that Jews cannot be fully trusted as citizens because their real allegiance is to Israel, not to America, not to France, not to Germany, always to somewhere else. He listed the tragic victims of this specific propaganda. This is what got Captain Alfred Dreyfus convicted of treason in France in 1894. He was innocent, but he was Jewish, so he must have been loyal to someone else. This is what got Leo Frank lynched in Georgia in 1915, dragged from his cell and hanged from a tree by a mob that believed a Jew couldn't be a real American. This is what the Nazi government used to justify the Nuremberg laws in 1935, stripping German Jews of citizenship because their allegiance was elsewhere. He paused, letting the dark history echo before dropping his voice to a low, condemning register. And in 2019, weeks after apologizing for the Benjamins' tweet, a sitting member of the United States Congress stood on a public stage and questioned whether Americans who support Israel have allegiance to a foreign country. He highlighted the absolute hollowness of her supposed contrition. The apology was 3 weeks old, Congresswoman. 3 weeks, and you were already back at it. He reminded her of her own political isolation on the matter. Your own party leadership condemned you again. Nancy Pelosi, again. The entire Democratic leadership, again. A joint statement, again. Anti-Semitism must be called out, confronted, and condemned whenever it is encountered, without exception. Those were their words about your words, for the second time in a month. And in 2023, he reminded the transfixed room, you were removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee by members of both parties for anti-Semitism, not for policy disagreements, not for partisanship. For anti-Semitism, Omar began violently shaking her head back and forth like a dog desperately trying to shake off cold water. This is you are taking everything out of context, she stammered defensively. I was talking about lobbying about the influence of Jewish money. Shapiro seamlessly finished her devastating sentence for her, pulling the trap completely shut. Because that's what you keep saying, Congresswoman. Every single time you try to explain yourself, you say it again. Buying Benjamin's allegiance. Every explanation is a repetition. The defense is the offense. You are so steeped in this language that you can't stop using it, even when you're trying to deny using it. Omar opened her mouth to mount a counterattack, snapped it shut, and opened it once more, but absolutely nothing came out. The entire gallery was cloaked in a stunned, suffocating silence. On her official campaign live stream, which her eager staff had initiated at the very beginning of the hearing to showcase her anticipated triumph. The viewership had tragically hemorrhaged half its audience in a mere 10 minutes, and the comments that remained were fiercely, brutally unsupportive. But anti-Semitism isn't the only pattern here. Congresswoman Shapiro pivoted effortlessly, seamlessly transitioning his assault to a new front. There's another pattern, a pattern of dishonesty that goes beyond words. And I'd like to walk through it with you if you don't mind. It won't take long. I talk fast. He laid out the inescapable new rules of engagement. I'm going to ask you some questions, Congresswoman. Yes or no answers. Simple. Even a Harvard Law dropout could handle them. And I actually graduated, so I'll do my best. The legal counsel seated directly behind Omar lunged forward in his chair. Did you legally marry Ahmed Nursai Elmi in 2009? Yes or no? Shapiro demanded rapidly. I've addressed this matter. Omar attempted to deflect. Yes or no? Shapiro pressed. These are bigoted accusations that yes or no, Congresswoman. It's a public record. You filed the marriage certificate. Did you marry Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi in 2009? Yes, she finally, painfully conceded. Thank you. Was Mr. Elmi a United States citizen at the time? He was a British citizen, she replied. A British citizen, not American. Thank you. Where is Mr. Elmi now? I believe he returned to, he's in London, has been for years. Interesting. Shapiro mused with lethal curiosity. Did you see Mr. Elmi after your separation in 2011? I have said publicly that I did not. Your Instagram account, under your nickname, Hami, shows photographs of you with Mr. Elmi in London in 2015, 4 years after you said you separated. Those photos are public. They've been archived. Would you like to explain them? Omar's lawyer frantically whispered urgent counsel in her ear, but she aggressively shoved him away. Those photos prove nothing about, I didn't say they proved anything, Congresswoman. I asked you to explain them, Shapiro countered smoothly. You said you hadn't seen him since 2011. The photos say 2015. One of those statements is false. Which one? This is harassment, she protested weakly. It's a question. Let's move on, he stated, maintaining his relentless, suffocating pace. Did you file joint federal tax returns with Ahmed Hirsi, your first husband in faith tradition, in 2014 and 2015, yes or no? This is a gotcha game I refuse to participate in, she snapped. It's not a gotcha game, Congresswoman. It's a yes or no question, Shapiro corrected her. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board already answered it. They found that you filed joint returns with a man you were not legally married to. You were legally married to Elmi, not Hirsi. You filed as married with the wrong man. He hammered home the official nature of the undeniable finding. That's not my opinion. That's their finding. They fined you $500 and ordered you to repay $3,469 to your own campaign for 8 violations, including using campaign funds to pay a law firm to fix those very same tax returns. I complied with you complied. You paid the fine. Good for you, Shapiro shot back instantly. But paying a parking ticket doesn't unpark the car. You filed fraudulent tax returns. That is a fact. He continued to aggressively tighten the vice. And when the Star Tribune investigated your marriage history, you refused to provide your tax records. You refused to provide your immigration documents. Your relatives refused to speak. The reporter wrote, and I'm quoting, that you maintained near total silence. He stared at her with piercing intent. Is that what innocent people do, Congresswoman? Maintain near total silence? Omar violently slammed her open palm down against the wooden dais, the sharp, desperate crack of the impact echoing loudly off the polished marble walls of the Congressional chamber. This is racist, she shrieked. You are a racist who hides behind facts and figures to attack. Tax law isn't racist, Congresswoman, Shapiro replied, utterly and completely unfazed by her emotional outburst. 26 U.S. Code, Section 613, applies to every married couple in America. White, black, Muslim, Jewish, everyone, even you. And calling me a racist doesn't change the numbers. It just means you can't answer the question. Desperate, she turned toward the head of the panel, her voice visibly fracturing under the immense, crushing pressure. Mr. Chairman, are you going to let this man bully me in this hearing? He is not a member of Congress. He is a podcaster. The chairman peered down at her over the rim of his reading glasses, completely unmoved by her plea. The witness was invited by this committee to provide expert testimony, he declared with authoritative calm. He has the floor. Congresswoman, you will have your opportunity to respond. This is outrageous, she yelled. The chairman's wooden gavel cracked down with absolute finality. You will have your opportunity. Defeated, Omar slumped backward into her heavy leather seat. Her hands were visibly trembling, not a calculated theatrical quiver designed for sympathy, but the deep, involuntary vibration of a human being who realizes they are entirely losing control, while a merciless bank of high-definition cameras captures every agonizing frame. Shapiro did not pause to savor the moment. He ignored the frantic outburst entirely and didn't even shoot a fleeting glance in the chairman's direction. His momentum was steadily building, rapidly shifting into the iconic signature Shapiro rhythm that had intellectually dismantled hundreds of progressive opponents across debate stages, digital podcasts, and national television screens. For Shapiro, when he was locked into this specific mode, interruptions were not speed bumps, they were high-octane fuel. Let's talk about your current husband, Tim Minette, political consultant Shapiro, launched into his next relentless volley. You married him in 2020 after both of your previous marriages ended amid allegations of an affair. His ex-wife, Beth Minette, filed for divorce, stating that her husband had declared his devastating and shocking love for you. He decisively picked up his pen, utilizing the sharp, distinct click of its cap to rhythmically punctuate every devastating data point he unloaded. Your campaign paid his company, the E Street Group, approximately $2.8 million during the 2020 election cycle. That's roughly 50% of your campaign's total spending. Half of every dollar donated to your campaign went to your husband's company. Click. At one point, 70% of your campaign expenditures in a single quarter went to the E Street Group. 70% to your husband. Click. After public pressure, you cut the E Street Group from your campaign. And the exact same services, advertising, digital, direct mail, fundraising, cost $1.8 million less from other firms. The same work, nearly $2 million less once your husband stopped doing it. Click. But it gets more interesting. He promised the entirely transfixed room, your husband's side ventures, a California winery called E. St. Croix, and a venture capital firm called Rose Lake Capital. In 2023, your financial disclosure valued them at a combined $51,000. 1 year later, 2024, up to $30 million. 51,000 to 30 million in 12 months on a winery. He looked around the deadly silent committee chamber. I went to Harvard Law, not business school, but I'm fairly confident that wineries don't appreciate by 0% in 1 year. If they did, Napa Valley would be the new Wall Street. Nobody laughed. The staggering figures were far too absurd to elicit any form of amusement. An investor sued your husband's company for fraud, alleged he was promised a 200% return on $300,000, never got paid. And your husband's company had its funds frozen by OFAC, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control. He paused to educate the millions of viewers watching the broadcast at home. For the people watching at home, OFAC is the agency that monitors financial transactions related to terrorism, international sanctions, and dealings with enemies of the United States. They don't freeze accounts because you forgot to file a form. They freeze accounts when money moves in ways that concern national security. He methodically set the pen back down on the table, summarizing the colossal avalanche of allegations, tax fraud, campaign fraud, financial disclosures that don't add up. A husband whose businesses explode in value while investors sue for fraud, and the Treasury Department freezes accounts, and a congresswoman who screams racist every time someone asked a question with a number in it. Picking the pen up one final time, he delivered his most famous catchphrase like a political death knell. Click. Facts don't care about your feelings, Congresswoman, and these are the facts. Suddenly, Shapiro's signature rapid-fire rhythm completely transformed, dropping from an aggressive sprint down to a deliberate, methodical walk. He didn't do drawls, but the velocity was unmistakably reduced. In the profound, sudden quiet that immediately followed, the entire room physically leaned forward in anticipation. They knew that when Ben Shapiro intentionally slowed his speech, he was transitioning from demanding intellectual rigor to commanding deep, undeniable emotional resonance. Let's talk about children, Congresswoman, he suggested softly. Not your children, the children in your district who were supposed to eat. He began to recite the horrifying statistics with the cold, detached precision of a seasoned federal prosecutor laying out a massive criminal indictment, no emotion, no commentary, just the brutal evidence laid end to end like shiny surgical instruments resting on a cold steel tray. Feeding Our Future, a nonprofit in your district, Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, which you represent. It was supposed to distribute meals to children during the COVID-19 pandemic. Federal money, taxpayer money, money appropriated by Congress, by people in this room, to make sure kids didn't go hungry while schools were closed. He let the ultimate betrayal sink in. Prosecutors say they stole over $250 million. $250 million. 78 people have been charged, more than 57 convicted. They set up 250 fake meal sites, strip malls that hadn't been open in years, addresses that didn't exist, a small market in a town called Waite Park that claimed to serve 2,000 meals a day from a building the size of a convenience store. He emphasized the sheer, unbelievable audacity of the crime. 500,000 meals from one store. To make the numbers work, they filled out attendance sheets with the names of children who were never there. Made up names, made up ages, ghost children. He paused, letting the devastating reality hang in the air. One beat, two. 3 cents of every dollar went to food. 3 cents, 97 cents went to luxury cars, real estate in Turkey and Kenya, cash in suitcases. The acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota called it industrial scale fraud. The FBI director called it the largest pandemic relief fraud in American history. And it happened in your district, Congresswoman, in the district you have represented for years. He shifted his weight forward, closing the physical and psychological distance. On March 11th, 2020, you introduced the Meals Act. That legislation relaxed federal requirements for school meal programs. It made it easier for organizations to participate and reduced oversight requirements. He delivered the ultimate devastating blow. Those were the exact requirements that prosecutors say were exploited to steal hundreds of millions of dollars. You opened the door. The fraudsters walked through it. I did not, Omar sputtered weakly, attempting to defend herself. You received campaign donations from individuals later convicted in the scheme. Shapiro pressed relentlessly. When that was reported, you returned the donations, your words, out of an abundance of caution. A member of your own congressional staff was convicted in connection with the fraud. You held campaign events at Safari Restaurant in Minneapolis. The owner of that restaurant was convicted. He held up 5 fingers, counting off the irrefutable connections, exactly like a trial lawyer presenting charges to a captivated jury. And when a reporter asked you whether you regret the Meals Act, the legislation you wrote, the legislation that opened the door, you said, and I quote, absolutely not. He listed them again. 1, you wrote the legislation. 2, the fraud happened in your district. 3, you took money from the fraudsters. 4, your employee was convicted. 5, you held events at a convicted fraudster's business. 5 connections. And your response to all 5 is absolutely not. Omar erupted in furious theatrical indignation. You are exploiting the suffering of children to score political points against a Muslim woman. Those are my constituents, not yours. You sit in your studio in Nashville making millions while my community, your community, lost $250 million. Shapiro's voice sliced through her emotional outburst with the terrifying ease of a razor blade gliding effortlessly through paper. Not louder, just sharper. $250 million. 3 cents of every dollar went to food. The rest is in Istanbul. Some of it, according to the Treasury Department, may have ended up with al-Shabaab. He reminded her of her own incredibly callous words, and you said absolutely not when asked if you regret the law that opened the door. Those criminals stole from my community. I am the victim here, too, Omar cried out defensively. You returned donations from convicted fraudsters out of an abundance of caution. Those are your words. Shapiro dismantled her fabricated victimhood. Innocent people don't return money out of an abundance of caution, Congresswoman. They return it because they know where it came from. And people who are truly victims don't usually have to explain why they were taking money from the criminals in the first place. Omar simply stared at him, her mouth agape in a desperate bid for air, utterly incapable of formulating a response. Absolutely nothing came out. Just over her shoulder, her panicked staff had entirely abandoned texting favorable video clips to the press. They were now exclusively texting frantic damage control, and one terrified aide had completely left the hearing room entirely. Congresswoman, you accused Jewish Americans of having allegiance to a foreign country. You said it publicly, on the record, in 2019. The suggestion that American Jews can't be trusted because they care about Israel, dual loyalty. For the first time during the entire hearing, Shapiro reached out and picked up a single sheet of paper, the very first document he had touched. This is a transcript of a speech you gave in January 2024 at an event in Minneapolis. You spoke in Somali to a Somali American audience. The speech was posted on YouTube by your own campaign. 3 separate news organizations have verified the translation. He began reading directly from the rigorously verified text. You told the audience that the United States government would follow the lead of Somali Americans. You told them that Somalia would remain safe as long as you hold your seat in Congress. You promised a foreign country, Somalia, protection from your seat in the United States Congress. Setting the damning transcript gently down, he ensured the full committee grasped the profound, staggering hypocrisy. Let me make sure the committee understands what just happened here. In 2019, this congresswoman stood at a public microphone and accused Jewish Americans of having allegiance to a foreign country. She told the world that Jewish support for Israel was really about money, all about the Benjamins. She implied that Jews who support Israel cannot be fully trusted as American citizens. Dual loyalty. The oldest anti-Semitic accusation in Western history. He delivered the knockout blow, exposing the ultimate paradox. And then, and this is the part that matters, she went to a community event in Minneapolis, spoke in Somali so that the broader American public wouldn't understand what she was saying, and promised her audience that she would use her seat in the United States Congress to protect Somalia, that the U.S. government would follow the lead of Somali Americans, that Somalia would be safe as long as she held her seat. He leaned in, driving the nail into the coffin. She accused Jews of dual loyalty. Then she demonstrated her own. Omar violently pushed herself up from the table, her heavy chair loudly scraping backward against the marble floor before he had even managed to finish his sentence. You stole that video. That was a private community event. It was posted on YouTube, Congresswoman, by your campaign on your official campaign YouTube channel. Shapiro corrected her effortlessly. It has been up for over 2 years. Anyone in America can watch it right now on their phone in this room. It is not stolen. It is not private. It is public. You published it. The translation is wrong. This is a deliberate mistranslation designed to 3 separate news organizations verify the translation independently. He fired back, immediately burying her under an avalanche of verified evidence. Reuters, Fox News, the Star Tribune, your hometown paper. 3 organizations, 3 independent translations. Same result. Shapiro gracefully gestured toward the live microphone stationed in front of Omar. Would you like to provide your own translation right now, on camera, word by word? I'll wait. The committee will wait. The American people will wait. He began counting the agonizing seconds. 5, 10, 15, 20. The crushing silence stretched out indefinitely, transforming into a profound, undeniable testimony of its very own. Omar did not provide an alternative translation. She refused to sit back down, and she uttered not a single word. She remained entirely frozen, one hand braced against the mahogany dais, the other tightly gripping her disorganized papers, hopelessly trapped in the vast, unbridgeable chasm between what she desperately wished to say and what she knew she couldn't say without making the situation infinitely worse. The translation stands, Shapiro remarked quietly, because it's accurate, and you know it's accurate. And the reason you're not providing your own version is not because the translation is wrong. It's because the translation is right, and any version you provide will confirm it. This is a witch hunt, Omar's voice fractured in complete desperation. This is a witch hunt against Muslim women, against the only refugee in Congress. You are trying to silence Congresswoman. I'm not silencing you. I'm quoting you. There's a difference, Shapiro replied, his voice never rising. In fact, it never rose the entire time. Everything I've said today has been your own words played back to you. Hypnotize the world, your words. All about the Benjamins, your words. Allegiance to a foreign country, your words. The Somali speech promising to protect Somalia from your congressional seat, your words, posted by your campaign on your YouTube channel. I'm not trying to silence you. I'm trying to get you to listen to yourself. Shapiro allowed the longest, heaviest pause of the entire hearing to settle over the room, a silence so profound and lengthy that every single camera had time to find his face, making the absolute quiet the loudest thing in the chamber. You accused my people of the thing you were doing, he stated with quiet, devastating finality. There were no dramatic, cinematic gasps. The room simply plunged into a flat, exhausted silence, the very specific kind of quiet that emerges only when a cold, Undeniable truth has been laid bare so perfectly and so plainly that there is absolutely nothing left to add to it. It was the collective realization of an audience watching a high-profile politician become inextricably caught completely on the official record, with literally nowhere left to run or hide. The word for that, Congresswoman, is projection, Shapiro concluded. And the word for doing it from a seat in the United States Congress is something worse. Overwhelmed, Omar hastily began aggressively grabbing her scattered papers, her folders, and her smartphone. She forcefully pushed back from the dais, clearly intending to abandon the proceedings altogether, and took 2 determined steps toward the side exit door. Congresswoman, the hearing is still in session. The chairman's voice boomed, projecting the immense, undeniable authority of his gavel without even needing to physically use it. If you leave this hearing, the record will reflect that you departed during testimony. She froze in her tracks, turning to face the unyielding chairman, then scanning the array of 6 television cameras, all meticulously tracking her movements and actively recording her flight. She glanced longingly at the exit door, then slowly, begrudgingly returned to her seat, slumping down with both hands resting limply on the table, her head bowed low so her hijab completely obscured her humiliated expression. Her severely depleted staff, what was left of them, as 2 had already successfully slipped out the side door, sat behind her with the grim, defeated posture of mourners trapped at a funeral service that had painfully outlasted its welcome. Shapiro watched her sit down with the cool, calculating detachment of a surgeon observing anesthesia successfully taking hold of his patient. Then he moved to his final point. "One more thing, then I'm done," he announced. Shapiro finally reached for the solitary photograph that had been lying face down on his desk since the very beginning of the grueling ordeal, slowly turning it over, the only slow physical gesture he had permitted himself besides his opening statement. He didn't hold the picture up for the flashing cameras or the panel of politicians. He held it up exclusively for Ilhan Omar to see. It was a tender family portrait, a woman reverently lighting candles, 4 young children gathered around a dining table adorned with fresh bread, wine, and a pristine white tablecloth. The eldest daughter wore a tiny kippah, her hands clasped and eyes shut in deep, innocent prayer, while the youngest child, strapped safely in a high chair, reached eagerly for a piece of challah bread. It was an intimate snapshot of a Jewish family engaging in a sacred tradition they had fiercely protected and practiced every Friday night for 3,000 years. "This is my family," Shapiro shared, his voice trembling with a raw vulnerability he rarely exposed to the public. "My wife, Mortiro. She's a physician. She delivered babies during her residency while receiving death threats for being married to me. My 4 children." He explained the deep personal context of the picture. "This was taken at our Shabbat table, Friday night dinner. We light candles, we say prayers, we break bread. We've done it every Friday night since before my oldest was born. It is the most sacred hour of our week." His voice slowed to a dramatic speed the room had absolutely never heard from him, the signature machine gun cadence that had famously defined a decade of fiery podcasts, speeches, debates, and viral clips went entirely silent. In its place was something the audience had never encountered from Ben Shapiro. True vulnerability, not weakness, not calculated performance, but the unguarded, terrified voice of a father talking about the safety of his children. In 2016, someone took a picture of this girl, my oldest, she was 3, and photoshopped her into a gas chamber, a Nazi gas chamber with bodies on the ground and my daughter's face pasted in. He detailed the horrific, invasive nature of the threat. The email included our home address, not our office address, our home where our children sleep. My wife found it on her phone while she was making dinner. She was pregnant with our second child. The room was steeped in a silence so impossibly profound that the gentle hum of the building's air conditioning system became audible for the very first time during the entire hearing. "Everyone receives threats," Omar blurted out. She said it automatically, a defensive reflex deployed with the careless ease of someone absent-mindedly swatting away a bothersome fly without even thinking. Those 3 catastrophic words were tossed out into the silent room like a dismissive shrug, the verbal equivalent of equating the unspeakable horror of a 3-year-old toddler digitally placed into a Holocaust gas chamber with the mundane annoyance of dealing with a mean comment on Twitter. The gallery reacted instantly, well before Shapiro or anyone else could even fully process the sheer magnitude of the statement. A deep, collective groan rippled through the public seating, not a loud protest, but the visceral, physiological sound a room inadvertently makes when something so catastrophically wrong has been spoken that human bodies physically respond before the brain can even formulate intellectual objections. The veteran journalists in the front row jerked their heads up from their laptop screens simultaneously, reacting exactly like a flock of birds, turning their heads together at a sudden, terrifying noise. On the Democratic side of the committee panel, one of Omar's closest political allies painfully shut his eyes, desperately rubbing the bridge of his nose in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. Up in the gallery, the loyalist who had previously cheered her on quietly placed her supportive Ilhan sign flat on the floor. Shapiro simply stopped speaking. He stared directly at Omar, his face entirely devoid of anger, contempt, or even surprise. Instead, his expression reflected something infinitely more devastating, the grim realization of a man who has just watched his adversary gleefully plunge into a deadly trap that he hadn't even bothered to set. He hadn't orchestrated this specific moment. He never anticipated she would interrupt a deeply personal story about his threatened child. Yet she had, and her callous, unscripted dismissal was infinitely worse than anything he could have meticulously accused her of, purely because she had spoken the unforgivable words herself, in her own unmistakable voice, permanently etching them onto the official record where they would exist forever. Congresswoman Shapiro began, his famous rapid-fire delivery dropping to a terrifying zero velocity. My 3-year-old daughter, a gas chamber. And your immediate instinctive response is, everyone receives threats? He locked eyes with her in an agonizing 5-second stare until she desperately looked away, covering her mouth in a panicked realization of what she had just done. That response tells me more about you than anything you've said today, he declared, delivering his absolute crushing judgment. That was reflex. That was the real you. Slamming his family photograph face down on the table, the legendary Shapiro machine gun cadence violently roared back to life. He traced the deadly, bleeding trajectory of her anti-Semitic rhetoric, proving how her words traveled from the congressional floor straight to the extremists, threatening his family and attacking synagogues. Then he did something he hadn't done all hearing. He stood up. Towering over the completely shattered politician, he rained down a relentless, rhythmic hammer of undeniable facts. Forced to apologize for religious bigotry? That's you. Removed from a committee for anti-Semitism? That's you. Dismissing a death threat against a Jewish toddler? That is you. I came here today to testify about anti-Semitism in American public life. He concluded with icy finality. I didn't have to look far. It was sitting 10 feet away from me. Stripped of all her earlier arrogant bravado, Omar could only muster a weak whisper. You are a hateful, dangerous man. Shapiro didn't flinch, demanding an apology he knew she would never have the courage to give before abruptly turning his back on her. When the chairman called a recess, the room was paralyzed. Nobody dared to move. Omar sat completely frozen, desperately shielding her humiliated face, while her own smartphone live stream mercilessly broadcast her political destruction to 1.2 million viewers. The internet didn't just break, it detonated. That brutal, unscripted, paired with Shapiro's lethal soundbite, "You accused my people of the thing you were doing." The footage amassed a staggering 50 million views in under 48 hours. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a comprehensive, inescapable political execution. Fox News immediately cleared its schedule, broadcasting the entire uninterrupted hearing during prime time. That very evening, the Daily Wire released a highly anticipated special episode, its thumbnail featuring Shapiro grimly holding up his family portrait, while a blurred, defeated Omar sat helplessly in the background. The episode, simply titled The Surgeon, garnered 11 million views within its first 24 hours. Shapiro casually opened the broadcast with a single, devastating sentence. "Today, I testified before Congress about anti-Semitism." The congresswoman from Minnesota was kind enough to provide a live demonstration before coldly transitioning to his next news topic. The political fallout was swift, immense, and entirely merciless. CNN hosted a chaotic 40-minute panel desperately debating if Shapiro's testimony constituted Islamophobia, ultimately achieving nothing beyond guaranteeing the destructive clip survived another agonizing news cycle. MSNBC ran a defensive segment dubbed The Weaponization of Anti-Semitism that was viewed by 2 million partisans who had long since cemented their worldview. The Congressional Black Caucus released a lukewarm statement defending Omar, but only 19 out of its 62 members agreed to sign it, leaving a deafening silence from the remaining 43. When cornered in a Capitol hallway, Hakeem Jeffries offered a cryptic deflection. I respect the Congresswoman's service, deliberately omitting which Congresswoman he meant before rushing away from journalists and dodging the follow-up. The Anti-Defamation League released the absolute strongest statement about a sitting congressional member in the organization's entire 3-year history, while Jewish community relations councils across 12 major cities demanded an immediate formal apology. In a scathing open letter circulated by rabbis, amassed 14,000 signatures in a mere 72 hours. Omar remained defiantly silent, offering no apology. But the institutional walls were rapidly closing in around her. Within a week, House committees quietly issued subpoenas targeting the financial records of Tim Mynette's expansive corporate network. The Oversight Committee aggressively reopened its dormant inquiry into Omar's murky financial disclosures. The IRS processed a formal referral, and the DOJ significantly expanded its ongoing inquiry. None of these catastrophic developments were formally announced. They were uncovered by relentless journalists tracking the frantic legal filings. Her political war chest evaporated overnight. FEC records revealed she had raised a paltry $190,000 for the quarter, a catastrophic plunge from the $940,000 she secured during the same period the previous year. ActBlue registered net negative fundraising on her account for 3 consecutive weeks as donors fled, while Emily's List quietly scrubbed her name from their endorsement page without any announcement, and 3 major progressive PACs declined to financially commit to her upcoming election cycle. Sensing blood in the water, 2 serious primary challengers immediately filed in Minnesota's 5th District. The most formidable contender, a Somali-American business owner who had fiercely condemned the Feeding Our Future fraud, hosted a massive press event in Cedar Riverside and secured $400,000 in his first week without uttering Omar's name a single time. The international shockwaves were equally severe. In the halls of the Knesset in Jerusalem, a member explicitly quoted the "You accused my people" clip during a fiery floor debate, while prominent European Jewish organizations across London, Paris, and Berlin released highly coordinated statements. Omar's infamous "Hypnotize the World" tweet from 2012 experienced a horrific viral resurgence, reshared 5 million times in a single week, with every single retweet weaponized by the exact same reply. A clip of Shapiro declaring, "Same lie, different century." Following the disastrous hearing, Omar had desperately fled the chamber through a discreet side door. Cameras relentlessly documented the back of her head as her staff aggressively flanked her, one aide desperately hiding a phone face down, while a relentless TMZ cameraman chased her down the marble corridor. She refused to turn around, diving into a black SUV idling in the basement garage before the door slammed shut and the car sped away. What followed was a massive 72-hour blackout, marking the absolute longest stretch of public silence in her entire political career. Omar posted absolutely nothing, no tweets, no press statements, no defiant videos, and her office phone defaulted directly to voicemail. Finally, on the 3rd agonizing day, a text-only written statement materialized online, entirely devoid of a press conference or video address. It coldly declared the hearing was a political stunt designed to silence Muslim voices in Congress. I stand by my record. It completely ignored Shapiro, dodged every specific claim, and notoriously avoided addressing the horrific "everyone receives threats" moment entirely. The hollow statement scraped together a pathetic 4,200 likes, while the devastating video clips of her destruction continued their relentless climb well past 50 million views. Ben Shapiro, in stark contrast, exited the Congressional building through the grand main entrance. He paused in the bustling hallway for exactly 90 seconds. A Fox reporter eagerly asked, "Do you think Congresswoman Omar will resign?" Adjusting his yarmulke one final time, Shapiro delivered his clinical assessment. "That's up to her constituents. I presented facts. Facts don't care about her feelings or mine." Without taking a victory lap or seeking further follow-up attention, the man in the dark suit walked purposely past the historic portraits, the marble pillars, and the American flags, disappearing out the door and into his waiting car. That evening, when the Daily Wire episode went live to its 11 million viewers, his icy opening line, "The Congresswoman was kind enough to provide a live demonstration," was all the closure he needed. He then moved on to the next topic, and then the next. The surgeon, it seemed, simply had other patients waiting. If you were absolutely captivated by this incredible cinematic breakdown of unparalleled political theater, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment below detailing your reaction to this historic congressional showdown, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the most explosive moments in modern politics.